Welcome to Frameworks. This is a place for coaches who want more than just reps and sets. We dig into the principles, philosophy, and stories that help you coach with clarity, design with purpose, and to keep chasing mastery. Today, we're wrapping up our 3-part series on smarter program design. If you missed the last 2 episodes where we talked about the macro and the mezzo, be sure to check those out. They'll give you the long-term context for what we're building on today. So far, we've zoomed out to define the story, the plan, and we looked at it in seasons. Then we moved one layer deeper to build the rhythm through cycles and progressions. Now, we're going to zoom all the way into the micro or daily design. This is where your planning becomes program design. So by the end of this episode, you'll have an understanding of how to, number 1, design a great training program that aligns with the macro and mezzo plans that you already laid out. Number 2, understand the principles laying out a day of training. And number 3, choose the right exercise selection for the right person and at the right time. So let's get into it. All right, now we're getting into the micro. So whenever I say micro, just think of like daily plan or what you're actually doing on a day-to-day in terms of exercise selection. So like your A1 all the way to D2. Okay, so the micro is where the plan actually turns into the program. It's when the plan actually starts to be implemented by the end consumer, by your client, by the person. It's where design becomes an actual experience, where the quality of your planning determines the quality of your program design, and that determines at what rate your client sees results, or if your client see results at all. So as we walk through this, there's no exact formula to design a great training program. Okay, so we're talking about principles over the last 3 episodes where we talked about, looking long-term and then going short-term and then now going daily. So those are some really good principles to work within, but the real quote-unquote magic happens when you're actually looking at your program design being executed in real time, in real life. And that's what we talk a lot about here at OPEX, that's why we prefer individual design, because it gives you, a coach, an opportunity to actually see what's happening with your client week 1 versus week 2 versus week 3, all the way up to week 4, 6, 8, however long that training program is. So it's not a set it and forget it. So real coaching happens through the discernment of what's actually happening in the A1s, A2, B1, B2, so on and so forth. What we're going to talk about today is we're actually going to bring those things to life through that program design. So we're going to talk about things like exercise selection, how to order those exercise selection, tempo, reps, sets, rest. And then we'll hit a little bit on concepts of progression, but I more so want to focus on how do we bring the long-term plan all the way down to actual design here in CoachRx. Framework number 1 is really simple and it is very macro, okay? And this is the concept of prescribing with a level of intentionality. Okay, so at the very micro level, your job is to turn context into action or turn context into outcomes. Okay, so everything that we've talked about, from intake to consultation to that physical assessment to actually building your plans and all the structure you built across seasons and cycles, now shows up here in the daily program design. Okay, so the intentionality piece can be, otherwise said as, design with intent. Okay, so I'm doing a back squat, but why am I doing a back squat? Does my client have the ability to or capability to perform a back squat? How much load should I use? What should tempo look like? All of those things, we have to consider those. And the great news that we have here sitting right now is that we've already handled all that. All those questions have already been answered, and they were answered through obviously all the context that we have, but in us actually laying out the long-term and short-term programs. We already have this context in mind. So now we just have to continue to follow the rules that we already set for ourselves and for our clients in that planning phase. Now we have to implement. Okay, so what I want to do is I just want to talk about a loose 3-step process in implementation. Step number 1 inside of this framework is, like we already talked about, gather all of those inputs. Those are great context pieces. What are their capabilities? What are their priorities? What are their goals? And where are you trying to move them? So number 1 would be gather those inputs. Number 2, it would be organize outputs. Okay, so all that is organizing all of those inputs in that context into the program design itself. Okay, so let's make sure that our sessions are simple, principle-based. So what we talk about a lot here is Let's build resistance training around patterns. Let's build aerobic work around intentionality and progression and be really, really clear what we want the client to experience and actually write that out in your notes when you're designing these training programs. And then number 3, we want to actually deliver the prescription. So this is when you actually take your hands and you hit the keyboards and you're actually prescribing the A, B's, and C's inside of Coach RX. This is when you're actually prescribing the sets, the reps, the tempo, the rest, and the intention. Okay, so in Coach RX, this is your daily plan. Okay, this is your client's training program, how your clients will actually experience your planning and design. All right, now we're going to get into the weeds. And with framework number 2, we're going to talk about organizing and ordering with intention. So when I say organize and ordering, I just mean how you actually lay out your program design. Where does resistance training go? Where do characteristics within that resistance training program go? Where does aerobic or anaerobic training go? So this is what I mean when we talk about this. And the reason why this is important is that session structure and ordering can determine whether your program drives the intended adaptation or just produces random fatigue. And what we want to avoid is just to give people work for the sake of doing work. Okay, we want to make sure that there's some intentionality behind what work we're giving them and when we're giving them that work. So I just want to start off by saying that, number 1, the priorities for that training day ultimately drive the order. Okay, so when we talk about this today, principally, I'm just talking about it in terms of best practices and principally if you don't have any very specific priorities that you're driving home. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is relative to resistance training. And this is the concept of just respecting the strength continuum. Okay, so we should order our work so that the complexity and intensity decreases as fatigue rises. Okay, so I know that probably seems fairly obvious as a statement, but when we start to look at work and sometimes when we see people going through a training day, it's just all messed up, right? It's like, why are you doing sprints on the track after you just did 5x5s and you're just absolutely smashed and fatigued, right? Why are you doing hang power cleans tough and with trying to do them with great technique after you just did an A1 all the way through C2? Okay, so the strength continuum just gives us a framework to talk about how we should, number 1, move through a progression in someone's training life, but also how to move through a training day based on that progression. Okay, so at its very simplest, the strength continuum starts with absolute strength, and then we move to strength speed. Then we move to speed strength, and then we end with absolute speed. So in progression, that's how someone should progress. We have to be strong enough before we can express that strength through strength speed activities. And then we have to get good at that before we express our speed through speed strength activities. And then we have to be good at that to truly, truly express absolute speed. And that doesn't mean that you can't do them. I just mean to express them to your highest degree. Okay, so now let's talk about how this correlates or relates to what we're doing inside of a training session. When we start talking about what we're doing inside of a training session, and we're just going to live in la la land for a second and just imagine that someone's doing all of those things, all of those contraction types within a given session, we actually go the opposite way. So we're going to start with absolute speed, then we're going to go to speed strength, and then we go to strength speed, and then we go to absolute strength. So from a resistance standpoint, that's how we'll lay that out. And just to be clear, because I don't want to take it for granted that everyone knows what exercises fall into these, let me just give a couple examples. Okay, absolute speed, probably pretty simple, right? Like we're doing some Excel starts on the track. We're doing some, 50-meter sprint intervals or something like that with high intention. Okay, or maybe we're on an assault bike and we're rolling as hard and as fast as we can for 10, 12, maybe not 15 seconds, but 10 or 12 seconds. Okay, so those would be absolute speed activities or examples of speed strength. So the load is now becoming heavier, so speed decreases. So as I walk through this, absolute speed is going to be the fastest, and then as I go down, speed and acceleration will decrease. Okay, so now we have speed strength. So think of like your typical plyometric movements. Think about even some like light, really light touch and go, hang power cleans, hang power snatches, things like that. And when I say really light, I mean like 30-40% of 1 rep maxes. Okay. Then we would do strength speed activities. So strength speed would be like your Olympic weightlifting. Okay. So like cleaning and jerking and snatching and all of those things. So those would be strength speed activities. And then finally, absolute strength is everything else. So it's the back squat, it's the deadlift, it's the goblet squat, it's the dumbbell RDL, it's the leg curl, it's the lat pull down, right? We're doing absolute strength at that point. So as I walk through this, you'll notice that we start with high skill, high velocity movements or activities, and then we go to heavier strength, decrease in speed as we go from A all the way down to D, E, F, however many exercises we have in that training session. Volume and accessory work closes the session. So if we're just doing some work to get some blood pumping to the muscles or something like that for like a hypertrophy standpoint or muscle endurance or strength standpoint, we're going to do those at the end of the session. For most people, keep total training time at around 60 minutes. We just see a huge fall off when we start to go, 90 minutes, 2 hours in a single training session. So there's nothing like so concrete about like once you hit 60 minutes, gains just fall off of a cliff or anything like that. And there's nothing to say that you have to go all the way up to 60 minutes, but it's just best practices. What we see, try to keep those training sessions around 60 minutes. And you know what? For most clients, that's going to be good because most clients are going to want to spend 2 hours in the gym anyway. Okay, so keep it safe, keep it about 60 minutes max. So this is enough time to create some really quality stress, but it's short enough to protect consistency and recovery. Next, let's talk about some general concurrent training principles. So what I mean by this is now what type of work are you doing within a specific training session? Okay, so I'm going to use gain, pain, sustain. Okay, so gain is resistance training, sustain is aerobic training, and pain is anaerobic training. So what I want to talk about are some best practices and how to do combinations of those things on a given day. And again, this is all principled. Sometimes our priorities for that specific day, or if we're working with someone in, something that's highly sports specific, that might change the ordering because getting ready for that thing actually trumps these principles that we're talking about from a training standpoint. So that's what I want to walk through. But before I jump into these, I do want to say that I just find it best practice to just let the goal be the goal. Okay, so if today is a resistance training day, just do some resistance training, right? For energy systems or sustain work, just go walk that day. If today is all about sustain work, just make that a sustain focused day. Okay, and if today is a pain only day, just do pain work, just do anaerobics on that day. But I get it, life happens. Sometimes we want to mix these up and we want to blend some of these within a given training day. So I just want to give you some good principles in how to do that. Okay, so option number one, pretty obvious. Just do resistance training. Okay, so this would be gain only. So it's pure resistance session. So maybe do a warm up, then you do your main pieces, and then maybe you do some accessories. Okay, pretty simple. Next example is sustain only. So this is, again, simply aerobic only session. So you might do a little prep piece. You do your main body of work. Aerobically, maybe you do a quick cool down, some belly breathing, maybe you do some mobility work, whatever the case is, but you're just doing sustained work on that day. And then finally, we have pain day. Okay, so this is pain only. So high output, short bouts, high intensity, and very focused efforts. So this day is one of those days where if you think about anaerobic work, you're probably like, well, the bouts are pretty short, so this training session is going to be quite short. Not so fast, right? Because when we do these high effort bouts, we have to rest a long time. So you can actually do, 60 to 75 minutes of a pain only session and only do like 5, 6, 7 sets. Okay, depending on how long your sets are, because you have to rest for such a long period of time relative to the amount of time that you're working. Okay, so now let's get into some concurrent training. Okay, so now it's gain into sustain. Okay, so we're doing resistance training first, and then we're moving into aerobic training. And this is very popular in like group training facilities and CrossFit gyms and stuff like that. It's like I do my strength work, and then after my strength work, I do my metabolic conditioning. Okay, so nothing wrong with this. It's strength work followed by aerobics. All right. Now, what if we were to flip those? Okay, sustain into gain. Okay, so this would be aerobic first, and then we do some resistance training after. If we do this, we are saying that aerobics are the priority, and there's nothing wrong with that. Are we going to express at our highest degree of effort in that resistance training if we do aerobic work first? No, absolutely not. But that's okay, because if we're doing it in this order, we're doing that intentionally because aerobics are the goal. Okay, so sustain into gain, good to go as long as aerobics are the priority. Okay, next we have sustain into pain. Okay, you'll notice what's not on this list is pain into anything else. Okay, we always end sessions with pain if we're blending that type of work. Okay, so here we're doing aerobics first, and then we're going into pain work. You might do this for like competition prep. You might see this to prep like the aerobic system to be able to maximize some anaerobic work. I've seen that work really well, but this is good to go. Sustain into pain. Okay. Next, we have gain into pain. So very similar to what we did in gain into sustain. And you see a lot of group training facilities, CrossFit gyms do this as well, depending on what they're doing for that metabolic conditioning piece. You're doing some resistance training. And then after that resistance training, you're going to go and do some anaerobic bouts. I will caution here though, okay, because a lot of anaerobic training or pain training is so metabolically focused, and to induce that metabolic focus, usually we have to use our extremities. Okay, and usually when we do that, we're using our legs. So think things like tough row intervals, tough bike intervals, whether it's like a bike erg, spin bike, an assault bike, anything like that. So it's very lower body dominant. So we just want to be careful in what we're doing in gain. If we're doing we probably shouldn't do 10 by 10 squats and then do some pain after that. You're just going to be absolutely smoked. So keep that in mind, but it's good to go gain into pain. Next we have, and now it's get your popcorn ready for this one. It's gain into sustain into pain. Okay. So this is a full mix session. This is very rare, but I have seen this work well in sport specific prep. We just have to really, really manage fatigue when we do this. So gain, sustain into pain. Rare, wouldn't recommend it unless you're doing some pre-comp type stuff. And then finally, and this is going to be very similar to the last one, it's sustain into gain into pain. Okay, so this is aerobic activation, then you're doing some strength work, and then you're going to end it with some high intensity work. Okay, so you'll see this again in competition prep. If you just really want to get the system excited, maybe a little bit fatigued going into the gain pieces. I've seen this work well with a lot of CrossFitters. Especially when you have a multi-day or even a multi-event day, where you might do some tough, energy system pieces as event 1 and then event 2. And then you have to get your brain ready to hit a tough back squat or a tough triple on the power clean or something like that under some fatigue. So this is good to go in those scenarios. And then just ending with some pain work. Again, rare, demands a lot of focused recovery. So just make sure you're only doing this when necessary with folks. So that is framework 2, and that's all around organizing what you're doing within a specific training day. Framework number 3, we're now getting into exercise selection. And this is a framework or principle that we want to always remember. We need to prescribe what serves the client, not what just excites them or maybe excites us and gets us really excited to, use a brand new exercise selection that we haven't used with this person before. We just have to always make sure that it serves the purpose, serves what we've already laid out in the long-term and short-term plan. Okay, so exercise selection, again, this is where a lot of coaches just lose a lot of clarity. And I think that it's not because of lack of knowledge in most cases. I think it's impatience. It's I've already done this exercise with the last 15 people that I designed a training program for. It's yeah, there's probably a reason, right? It's probably because it's a really good, really effective exercise that fits a lot of your people's capabilities. So don't second guess or third guess yourself too much when it comes to exercise selection. The best exercise is the one that your client can perform well and with consistency, okay? The one that serves the intended adaptation. Remember that we're going from top down. We've already made the plan. Now we have to make sure that the exercises that we choose serve that plan, and they can only serve that plan if they match the intended adaptation that's connected to that plan. So your daily exercise choices should always reflect where your client is in the larger plan, not just what might be cool for that day. Okay, so The macro gives the long-term story. The mezzo gives the training focus. And the micro, this level, is when that training focus is actually brought to life through exercise selection. And this is a little bit outside of the full intention of this series, but I have to take it back to assessment. Okay, so we always have to connect design to the capabilities that you discovered through your assessment. Okay, so specifically our movement screens. If our movement screens are serving the purpose to understand what someone is capable or incapable of in moving through patterns, then there are a lot of exercises that just stick out as like must-dos, or maybe even more importantly, there's a lot of exercises that are crossed off because they are incapable of doing them. So just always think through the assessment. Okay, what did the assessment tell me? And that's why assessment tracking lives right inside your training calendar in CoachRx. If you're ever kind of like second guessing things, just pull that thing out, go to Move, and just see what your clients are incapable or capable of performing. Another thing to consider is to design by training age. Okay, so we're going to walk through 3 examples. We're going to walk through beginners, intermediates, and advanced. Don't get too caught up in like making sure that all of your clients fit perfectly in one of these boxes. Just say, as it relates to program design, where do I think they fall? Okay, if a beginner or if your client can't move effectively through all patterns of movement, okay, they're probably a beginner. And then use, your judgment as well. Okay, so if they have like some injury that doesn't allow them to, retract their scapulas, don't like try to fix that if that injury is never going to be fixed or overcome. You might just need to work around it, and you can train them like an intermediate or advanced if they truly fall there in all the other patterns. If someone has some experience and they can move well enough through all patterns. Maybe they've been doing this for like, a year and a half, 3 years. Maybe they do fall into that intermediate phase and you're training them like an intermediate. And if someone has just like essentially mastered all patterns of movement, you're no longer thinking about teaching them how to move better and things like that. And they have some years under their belt, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they're probably in that advanced category. Okay, so beginners, how do we train beginners? How do we choose exercises or design programs for beginners? Number one, we have to understand that we have to frequently expose them to all patterns. We want to build motor control. So motor control just means I need to learn how to move. Motor control, motor learning. We need to build coordination, and we need to do that consistently. Okay, so don't get too complex. Use single implements, dumbbells, body weight, cables, barbells. Machines are great for beginners. Okay, locks them in and allows them to focus on specific areas through these patterns of movements. Okay, and then when it comes to a split, what are you doing on a weekly basis? Do full body resistance training with these folks. So if they're training 2 to 3 times per week in resistance training, that ensures that they're getting an adequate amount of frequency and volume in all patterns of movement. Just think about that. Imagine if someone's training 3 times per week and you're like, I want you to do upper, lower, and then upper. It's like, dude, you're doing like the squat and the bend pattern maybe 1 time per week. Okay, we want to do all that stuff all 3 days, increasing frequency. Let's lower intensity a bit. Let's make sure that we're taking them through good tempoed movements, controlled movements, all of those things. Okay, so typical adaptation for these folks is motor control and early accumulation, early and often accumulation. They're just rolling through accumulation phases like we talked about in our last video. Okay, so they're just rolling through those accumulation phases. And to be frank, guys, they're going to get better at a lot of things. Okay, so your priority and your goal might be motor control with this individual, but you know what? They're also going to get stronger, even though that wasn't like your main priority. They're going to get stronger. They're going to build some muscle. They're going to get leaner probably if everything stays even outside of the gym. But what you're looking at is, are you making them better movers through all 6 patterns? Next, we have our intermediates. So for these individuals, the focus shifts towards strength endurance and just refinement of the motor control that you've already built. So we can use full body training. I am a massive proponent of full body training. I've been doing it for like the last decade, and I'll probably do it for the rest. I definitely will do it for the rest of my life. So you can use full body with these folks, or you can go upper lower splits. But just make sure that if they fall into that example that we just talked about at the beginner, where they're only training 3 times per week, don't go with an upper lower. Just go with full body. Okay, so as we go from beginner to intermediate to advanced, we're going to talk about additional things that you can add to the training program, but that's not saying that you have to do that to the training program. Okay, so you can do accumulation here. You can still go full body. It's just the intention and what's inside of that is going to look a little bit different than the beginner. Okay, so here we're progressing toward higher intensity, cleaner positions, denser sessions. So we're doing more intensity inside of those sessions. Typical adaptation here is we're still going through accumulation, but now we're starting to transition into some full intensification phases. So in those accumulation phases that they're used to, where they're doing like 8s or 10s or 12s, now you're shifting them into like 4-week bouts of intensification phases where you're doing like triples on the back squat and you're doing that for like 4 to 5 sets and you're really challenging them to put some load on the bar. All right, next we have the advanced individuals. So here the focus can narrow to specific motor refinement or just holding on to the really good movement that they've been able to do over the past decade. Okay, we're doing some max contractions. We're not doing all max contractions. We're not doing all power expression, but now they have the ability to touch those things. So we're doing some max contractions. We're doing some power expressions, things like that. So we're using pattern or muscle specific splits depending on goals, training frequency, and just your preference. I prefer pattern splits personally, but I've met many coaches still to this day that just swear by and love muscle specific splits. At the end of the day, we're splitting hairs a little bit because you can lay 2 of those programs out next to each other and they can actually look the exact same. It's just the coach's intention behind them is what drives that difference. Okay, so here intensity kind of floats through, higher variations, lower variations. You might see some programs here where total volume is lower, longer recovery might be needed. And when we start talking about training adaptations and cycles, the advanced individual is actually training a lot like the beginner. They're doing a lot of accumulation. Okay, they can still touch intensification, but they're doing a lot of accumulation. And again, when I say this, I just mean the general population individual. If you have some sports specific individual that's like getting ready for a competition, you're going to do maybe some more intensification, maybe some pre-competition competition, but I'm focusing today on just general population. So the general population advanced individual is training a lot like the beginner. And the reason is that they can just express so much that it just takes so long to recover. Okay, so I've been training for a really long time. And if I go through, I don't even remember the last time I did this, but if I go through a 4-week phase of just intensity, my joints are going to hurt neurologically, cognitively. I'm going to be slowed down a bit, and it's just going to take me a long time to recover. That's why I personally just don't touch intensification. Maybe I'll go down to like 5s or 6s on some sets, depending on the split, but everything usually is like 10, 15, 20 reps, because, it's, you get the pump, you get a lot of blood in the muscle, but it's fairly easy to recover from those things as you get into that advanced trainee stage. When we start aligning our exercise selection with the client's not only just capabilities, but the specific phase of training that they're in, we start to make every session purposeful and not random. So in CoachRx, this is where the process really starts to come to life. So when you're in that training calendar, this is where you can filter by pattern, you can filter by equipment to find the exact exercise or the exact exercise variation. You can even use it as a library to kind of scroll through. So for example, if I want to look at, all squat pattern exercises that are done with a barbell, maybe it'll spark some ideas of some new exercise selection that my client is capable of by just scrolling through that. So you can use it to, find the exact exercise that you're looking for, or you can use it as a library just to discern what might be a good exercise, just to kind of part of that list down just a little bit. We also want to cross-check this against the client's current cycle type and adaptation intention. Okay, so just keep reminding yourself, okay, am I in an accumulation phase? Am I in an intensification phase? Is the goal here motor control or max contractions, right? What are my priorities in resistance training? And then we can add that exact prescription in CoachRx. So sets, reps, tempo, rest, maybe some notes on intention. So these intentions are clear and they are measurable. So we didn't talk a lot about energy systems training when we walk through program design. That's because when we start getting into energy systems training, I think that we make it actually a lot more complex than it needs to be. If the intention is to grow the aerobic base, find something that the client enjoys, that they're capable of, and that they're willing to spend a good amount of time on to build a solid aerobic base. If the intention is to increase aerobic capacity, so you start getting into like lower time domains, interval based, maybe you're like 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Again, the implement doesn't matter. It's all about capabilities, what your client really enjoys, what they're going to do, and where they can actually find appropriate paces on. So we just don't need to make aerobics that complicated or complex. And then even with anaerobics or OPEX pain, we also have to understand that the only intention of doing pain work, I'm not going to say the only, the main intention of doing pain work is to draw out a metabolic response. So exercise selection doesn't matter at all. It's only what the person is able to ramp up to a high RPM on, how they can actually elicit that metabolic response. You might have someone that is not skilled enough on a rower to actually go hard enough to elicit that metabolic response. So you put them on an assault bike. Who cares? It's all about where they can actually elicit that response. So guys, when we do all of these things consistently, we stop programming workouts and we start creating training experiences and great training programs that evolve logically from phase to phase and that are extremely intentional. So when we start to talk about what is a great training program, it's one that's built with intention, and it is just as simple as that. All right, so we've covered a lot over the last three pieces of this series, but when it comes to applying all of these things for yourself, just do the work, guys. That's the most important thing that you can do as a coach. That's how you get good at these things, is actually putting your head down and doing it, experience it. Okay, so that's going to be it for the micro, and this is the final piece of this series around designing smarter training programs. Over this 3-part series, we've talked about a lot of things in these 3 pillars of the macro, the mezzo, and the micro, which we talked about today. When these 3 layers align, you stop guessing and start coaching with purpose. Okay, so that's what a professional, great program designer does. They simply coach with purpose. Everything that they do is designed with purpose and intention. And to tell you the truth, guys, like when you see 2 training programs next to each other, there is no way that you can say one training program is good and the other one is bad. Principally, you might be able to say it, but you don't have the context. Okay, and that is so important to understand. So don't worry about what this other coach is doing with this client that's not your client. Worry about what you're doing with your client, and just strive to not only refine yourself and the craft of designing great training programs, but just really fight to get people results. Okay, so when you put that hat on, where you're just like, I know the principles, I know what works with this person and what doesn't work with that person, but now it's another n=1, and just strive to make the person in front of you better without beating them up. Okay. So that's it for this series. I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate you guys hanging with me over the last, probably 90 minutes to 2 hours. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to drop those below and to let us know.